Hey guys, it's Josh, and welcome back to the Not So Bad Bachelor Pad, your favorite podcast for learning how to balance between being a functional adult and a raging dumpster fire. Joining us inside the Bachelor Pad this week is Lisa Johnson. Lisa, thank you for hanging out in the Bachelor Pad this week. I know that the year just kind of kicked off and you probably have a million other things that you're working on, but we appreciate the little bit of time you're spending with us today. How are you?
My pleasure. I'm doing great. How about you?
Good. I'm good. Season 4, guys, we made it. I figured we should talk about a subject that definitely does not get enough light. And this is a crazy story that I'm pretty sure a couple of you guys might be able to relate to. So, if you could ever imagine finding a partner, building a life together, that life then kind of falling apart or breaking apart, costing you multiple salaries over years of your life, just your whole world being flipped upside down, then you are definitely going to want to stick around for this episode. Uh, without giving too much away, Lisa, I think you kind of know what I'm talking about. Can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Yeah. So before I even get into like what I do now, yeah, I was in a relationship for nearly half my life. I met my ex-husband when I was in my very early 20s and thought we were a really good match on paper. I think we were. And we both love to read. I well, when I say on paper, it's because I thought that what he was telling me was true. So I knew we both like to read. I thought we both like to travel. I know we both like to try different things and go to different restaurants and concerts and things together. We live near New York City, but we ended up spending 20 years together and having 2 children together, and at the very end, I discovered he had been living a double life the entire time. So, yeah. So it took me 2 years from learning, like, the very tip of the iceberg, and then it all falling apart and discovering more and more chaos, and then planning my exit for the next 2 years, thinking, okay, this should be amicable. We've both already been through years of trying to do therapy and everything else. And then I met with a divorce attorney for the first time, and he told me after listening for 20 minutes, yours is going to be one of the really bad ones. And I couldn't believe it because, I mean, I really thought that my ex was a good person. I thought he was one of my best friends. And I just kept thinking, yeah, he's done some bad things, but it can't be that bad. And how did this lawyer know this? He was right. I thought the divorce would cost $10,000, which I couldn't afford at the time. It cost 10 times that amount. It cost $100,000 that I'm going to be paying back forever and a year of my life. And that was one out of 10 years. So I ended up being in the legal system for 10 years. The divorce was just part one, and then took a little break to gather up to start building my case. And then 7.5 years represented myself through about 100 court appearances on the family court level and then also at the appellate court level. And in the process, my ex also sued my partner and I for $4 million in defamation, got through that. And finally, there were several triumphs along the way I'll talk about, but it was rough.
Now, I know that some people think their breakup was probably the worst ever or the end of the world. This one really could have been one of the worst ever. I I couldn't imagine having a dollar amount in my head of like, okay, this is going to cost me this. That's a little high. I don't know if I'll even be able to like cover that. For it to then be not doubled, not tripled, not quadrupled, but like to multiply by like 10,
Hmm?
that's
10.
crazy. I don't even know how I would handle that. And the fact that this consumed so much of your life afterwards, it wasn't just, hey, this isn't working out. We're just going to get a divorce and then see you never. I was like, no, this is something that drug on for years.
Yeah, yeah.
That's wild. Is there ever a point where you realized that this wasn't just a bad breakup, that this was almost abuse at some point? Because putting anybody through this rigmarole just sounds outlandish, especially if there was ever love in a situation or they were the parent of my children, you know?
Yeah. So I actually didn't know what it was. And remember, I thought that my ex was like a really good person. I thought he was one of my best friends, but that he had been deceitful. Like I didn't realize the level that we were at. I didn't understand personality disorders. I didn't understand domestic violence. All I knew was that Nobody else was in court for as long as I was, and people would say things like, "Why doesn't he just cooperate? Why doesn't he just follow court orders? Why doesn't he just show up for your kids?" Like, living in logic land, and it was so frustrating. And then several years ago, maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, after I started doing the work that I do, and we'll talk about that in a bit, I discovered the term legal abuse buried in a 2015 judge's manual from Washington State. And as I was reading through what it meant, somebody keeping you in the court system, not complying with orders, or constantly filing motions against you where you're just stuck all the time, your whole life is consumed by court. I was like, this is my life. This is crazy. And so Chris and I, my partner, we had started Been There, Got Out. And I thought, we were thinking, okay, we're going to help everyone dealing with toxic relationships. But I was like, I want to really focus in on what I know best at this point. And I always say I got my best education in the trenches. So I thought, let's start a legal abuse support group. Now, my background is as a high school English teacher. My master's is in education. So I'm used to teaching and planning lessons. So it wasn't just someone going, oh, I want to start a support group. I was like, I know how to do this. I certainly understand the topic. And maybe if we can get just a couple of people for the first week, then I'll learn something. It'll help me as well because we know teaching is one of the best ways to learn. So in that first week, we got 12 people from all over the world that were dealing with the same thing, and I knew we were onto something. And then I started delving more deeply into what legal abuse meant. I found some great terms for it, like litigation abuse, paper abuse, because there's so much paper being filed,
Good
judicial
point. Yeah.
terrorism, and my favorite is stalking through the court, because that's what it really is. You cannot get away, and they use the legal system to wear you down and bleed you dry financially. And that's why I went pro se, or started representing myself, because at the end of that full year, my lawyer said, listen, your ex isn't going to die with this agreement, even though we agreed, which is stronger than a court order. He
Hmm.
said, you're going to be back in court and you cannot afford me, because he's going to continue to decimate you. So, what we need to do is start building a paper trail, and you're going to go back on your own. And if you need me, I'll find you a paralegal because it's going to be too expensive. But you don't have a choice because of what you're dealing with. And so, yeah, at that point, I had understood what kind of abuse I was dealing with. Also, so my partner Chris and I got together. Like, we used to place bets on whose divorce would finish soonest. Mine did. It took a year. His took 3 years and cost $300,000. We realized that ours was very different, and it was great to have someone to kind of work through what we were both dealing with, that we both had no idea what was happening, because
Hmm.
ours didn't follow that normal cadence of divorce where people are angry in the beginning and then things settle down, the bills get high, and people are like, all right, I'm going to move on with my life. I'm do what's fair and do what's best for the kids. That's the opposite of what happened in our cases. Both of our exes are still probably as angry as ever. They've certainly continued to stalk us through our social media and other things. And other people who live, like most of the world who lives in logic land, is like, why? But you broke up and they have a new partner, and why would they still? That's where dealing with someone who has a personality disorder has to be looked at through a totally different lens, because you are not dealing with someone in their right mind. And so everything has to be approached very differently. And so Chris and I learned a lot along the way. And that's what we do now as our full time career. We're high conflict divorce strategists that specialize in legal abuse. And part of that also involves not just the legal system, but a tremendous amount of these people, like our exes, end up weaponizing our children and trying to turn them against us, because they put them in these loyalty conflicts where the child is not allowed to love both of you. Everything is like, it's either me or you're out.
Can only imagine. That's a lot. I can't even imagine what that would. Because are your kids like in like middle school age, or are they a little older? Or
Now?
yes.
No, now they're in their 20s. So at the time
Okay.
they were 11 and 14 when we divorced.
And then that's still kind of the age where you can kind of understand, hey, we're not going to be together, but the nuances of everything. But now I was like, I have to ask, what is that like? Because I feel like that had to have strained a relationship with both parents in a sense, because they're probably understanding like I was used to hurt mom, or, or I was a bargaining chip, because that's a whole different thing. As a child of divorce or not a whole home, I get being a bargaining chip, and I know that sucked. So I can only imagine. And my parents' situation seems like child's play compared to what you have gone through, but that had to have been tough for them too.
Yeah, it was really tough, and my situation was a bit different than most people's situations that we work with. Most people that we work with are in these extreme custody battles. Mine was more financial, which made it even sadder, and my son said at one point, "I wish you had had a custody battle." My ex was like, "Take the kids," and he just left, and I'll never forget, right in front of our kids, he had a keychain with, like, how sometimes you have, like, a little, like, ShopRite card or those little things on,
Yeah.
passes to things. So when he was moving out, my kids were there, and he had a pass to the library, like the library card, and to the YMCA where he used to sometimes bring our son. And he took them
Mhm.
off the keychain and threw them on the table and goes, "I guess I don't need this anymore," and left. And it was like, so my situation was really dealing with abandonment of the kids and
Mhm.
the pieces and trying to figure out how to explain to these 2 kids what was going on because I didn't know what was going on. I thought when we separated, I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna have weekends to myself sometimes." The first time in over a decade. So I was excited. I was just like, "This is g like, I'm finally gonna get a break, and he's gonna we're gonna balance out the schedule a little bit more." Like, I was really looking forward to this new life, and it was the opposite. I became what's known not as a single parent, but a solo parent. That's where the other
Right. Yeah.
completely not involved at all. So that was really, really tough, with the kids, and their relationship is complicated. I think that children, they're half of each of us, and they do need to work on those relationships no matter what's happened, but they really did not have contact for a long time. There was a lot of anger. Like I said, our case was financial. The heart of it, when I went back and represented myself, was because he refused to help contribute to our children's college education, which, having like, I mean, I'm an educator. Education is one of my main priorities and top values. Like, I think everyone should have the opportunity to have an education. I think ignorance is what destroys us. So, and my ex went to college too, and it was just like we always talked about college. Every weekend we'd have a meal with his family, and his father was really rich, and he'd be like, "Oh, I'm going to pay for the college of all my grandkids," and we'd be like, "Great, great, great." And then my ex was like, "Let's not put any money aside for college. We'll just put it into my retirement account because my dad's going to pay for college." And of course, zero. And then not only that, his father died. And then he just said, "I'm not giving a penny." He said, "If you divorce me, I'm not paying for the kids' college." And I was like, that's like a totally different thing. And
Right.
yeah, so
It's
the
almost like they're still your kids. It's not like they
right.
were my kids and you were like paying for them. These are your kids.
Yeah, yeah. He ended up moving out. He moved in with his father, who, like, let's say the place was squalid, and it was just like a small apartment. It was just like his dad. I don't even know if he had a bedroom there, but he had no plan to ever take the kids, but insisted on 50-50 custody. So we figured out like a parenting plan and mediation, but then he never once took the kids. He didn't show up for holidays. He showed up once and then, took my son for 45 minutes and then said, "Oh, I'm sick," and dropped him off again. It was just like, where are you? So that's very different than most of our clients. Most of our clients, they are waging war to fight for the kids. And even someone who doesn't want the kids will fight for the kids to punish their ex because that's the tool.
I it's
I'm sorry, Josh. Like I see you're
No, it's
overwhelmed.
so crazy to me, these situations, sometimes, because you're right, like, you always hear about these nasty custody battles. You never hear about somebody trying to drain the other person's bank account, and then on top of that, like, me and my brothers have, maybe the past 2 or 3 years, really started thinking about legacy because we didn't really have one, or the one we were given from our grandparents has kind of been, like, destroyed, so
Mhm.
we've been building our own. So, kids and family is super important to us because that's the legacy that we like that you'll leave behind. And so to not even care enough to try to keep that bond with your legacy is wild to me. Imagine it. Hopefully this is a thing that we leave in the first quarter of the Lydia, and the rest is just going to be about amicable situations. That is one thing I'm super happy that my mother taught me was civility. That's a skill looking through at most of the situations today. Not a lot of people have. They really are tit for tat. They love retaliation. It's not about consequence. It's all about this moment. And I couldn't imagine being just on the other end of that. So I'm glad that you were able to kind of survive of it and make a huge pivot to not only help yourself, but to help however many others that you have so far over the past few years.
Yeah, and what you mentioned is, like, civility, that's something that's lacking, like you said, all over, but especially in family courts, and in these situations, there's a complete lack of civility. Often our clients' exes, including my ex, will hire these attorneys that just bully, and
Mhm.
the process here is called adversarial. It's not the opposite, like in England, called inquisitorial. So inquisitorial is where the judges and the lawyers they produce evidence, and everyone's looking carefully at things to come to decisions. Here in America, it's like the judge is a referee and the lawyers are screaming at each other and screaming at the clients, and it's just like who's the loudest. So it's very frightening to be in court.
I mean, it literally redefines courtroom drama, or is the
Mhm.
definition of courtroom drama. I say my life is a movie, but I don't ever think I would want it to be that movie.
No.
Yeah.
You definitely don't. And the thing is with the movies and court, there's the craziness, but in the movies you see justice and you see punishment and like things are made right. And that is not at all what happens in family court. So people come in and they're like, I got to tell the judge my story, and the judge is going to validate my story. And we're just like, no, this is as if you are paying $8 million for a 30-second Super Bowl commercial. If you even get 30 seconds to talk, many people don't even get a chance to talk at all.
Yeah, I do hear that, and that's why it's not wild. Nobody really has a clean understanding of the legal system until they're swept in it,
Mhm.
which is super unfortunate. I have somebody ask me, they're like, "They can't just sue me for this," and I was like, "It's literally the definition of a frivolous lawsuit." It's like, it doesn't have to have substance, but it could still be such a major inconvenience and derail you from so many other things. So it's so sad, it's so sickening that once again we just can't be civil with each other. Like I get you don't love me, may have never loved me, you don't want to be with me. That's fine. I can live with that. But was I really so bad? Was I that big of a villain in your story that this is the get back that you chose?
Yeah.
That's the question I would have to ask.
Yeah. So
Because go ahead.
yeah, that's a really good question. People always ask some version of that, like why is this person not letting go? You know,
Mhm.
why is this different than a normal separation or divorce? And so what we understand is that when you're dealing with someone with an active addiction or a personality disorder, when a relationship ends, it doesn't matter who did it, but it triggers a deep sense of abandonment in them that comes back from childhood. So details don't matter. Even if they created the situation, it's like, and my ex even acknowledged that his biggest fear was abandonment. So as you're separating, that is so uncomfortable and so frightening for someone like that to acknowledge that they push down those feelings of failure as a spouse, and grief about what they thought was going to happen in the future. And it turns into rage. Sometimes people
Mhm.
use narcissistic rage, and they do something called splitting, where it's like they're all good and you're all bad. They're the victim and you're the villain. And they have to prove to everyone else because you ruined their life. You now have destroyed the appearance that they had this wonderful family, this wonderful home, beautiful children, successful, like you have now destroyed it by either ending the relationship or just going along, trying now, even if they broke up with you,
Right.
to keep pursuing ending it, that they just have to punish you. And so they will do everything. They will destroy, use all the money, they'll spend your kids' college money, they'll destroy their own reputation, your reputation. People go homeless in situations like this, but they don't care because, like you said, it's short term thinking. They're not thinking of the consequences because they don't have proper judgment. we say our clients belong to the "my lawyer says this is the craziest case they've ever had" club, because it's completely illogical. And that's why, like I said earlier, it has to be approached very differently. You can't come in with like anger and blame and accusations, because that stimulates that those feelings of abandonment. And then like a feral, frightened animal, they're just going to fight back harder, which costs lots of money and time and energy. So you really want to reduce the level of conflict as much as possible. And Chris and I actually belong to something called the Amicable Divorce Network. We're the only high conflict professionals I know in it. But the goal is child centered divorce, because the more conflict there is between the parents, the more it bleeds onto the kids and future generations. So it's so important to figure out how we can lower the flames and not choose professionals who contribute to fanning those flames of conflict.
No, that's super important. And I love that because if you do have children and you're going to bring them into the divorce, I think they should be the primary concern. I know we have wants of how much I want to see my child. I don't want to let them go. I think I'm the best person for them. But realistically, being objective and sitting down to be like, is this really what's best for them? Also, how is this going to affect them? Because it's not just about what school they're going to go to, who they're going to live with, but it's also how is their perception of love, of what a functional relationship is. How do I treat the other gender? How do I treat my own family dynamics? Like, there's so many aspects of it that people don't think about because they're thinking about here now and a month from now, which a month in the span of the relationship between parent and child is nothing. If they were in middle school ish, early high school at this time, I was like, you still have to finish high school, college, and then that weird kind of bubble right outside of college. So that's at least another 10, 15 years that you have to be a teammate of sorts with this person in order to try to at least get them out of the house passing in a semi-functional human. The fact that I would want to at least have a good standing with my partner, even if, we may not be on the same team anymore. So that's always something that I try to wrap my head around. And I'm glad that you guys are a part of a group that is really trying to encourage that.
Yeah. So you're speaking with like civility and logic and doing the right thing. And that's the problem. Like that's it's not a problem. It's what happens in 90% ish of cases, like reasonable, rational thinking, putting the kids first. And that's where it differs from the people that our clients' exes are, because they don't care about the kids. They don't care about doing what's fair or what's reasonable. They care only about themselves. And so everything is led by what's best for me. What am I entitled to? What do I deserve? And that's why we negotiate differently with them. Because by saying, we have to do what's best for the kids, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. But by telling them we have to do this because it's best for the kids, you're actually signaling to them. You're opening the door for how they can hurt you the most, because you're showing your cards and you're showing this is really important to me. They don't care. They'll be like, okay, that's where I'm going to get you. So, let's keep the kids' schedule as stable and consistent as possible. Nope. I'm gonna sabotage. I'm gonna say that you're an unfit parent. I'm going to say that you're a drug addict. We're going to distract with everything else. The kids are going to have no idea what's happening, who they're going to be with and when. And it's just like so disruptive and so damaging, but they don't care because, like you said, it's short term thinking.
Now, we spent a lot of time about the before and the descriptors. I really want to help those people because you never know you're going to be in one of these paper abuse situations until you're in it. But were there any signs in your actual relationship or towards the end that, the red flag started to go off? You started to hear the silent alarm to be like, hey, I kind of sense things changing in us and not for the better.
Yeah. So we were together for so long. I mean, there were red flags here and there, before it, but nobody pays attention to red flags. I mean, when has someone ever said, I heeded the red flags and stayed in the relationship? So nobody realizes what's going on till later. But when my lawyer said yours is going to be one of the bad ones, I thought, how did he know that? So later, when we were doing our first book, I interviewed him and came up with a list of a few factors that indicate high conflict divorce. Like, how do you tell the difference? So I gave an example already of someone with a personality disorder and or active addiction. Someone in recovery is completely different, but someone who's not in their right mind isn't even thinking in their own best interest. And so those are the cases that, blow up and they're very, very difficult to deal with because they're not being logical and they're not being reasonable. Another thing which happens constantly is when someone feels entitled to the money, where they're like, what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine too. And I get all the money. And on top of that, they hide assets and they hide what's called financial discovery. So during a separation, well, during a divorce, not always with a separation when you're not married, but most of the time, people have to show, especially when there's child support involved, you have to show what your financials are so that everybody can come up with something fair. I'm not saying equal, but something that seems fair. And then there's states in a lot of countries have calculators that are used to determine what child support could be. But people like our clients' exes, they don't feel like that's fair. So they just lie about their financials. So those are the things that could really drag out a divorce because you're constantly having to do subpoenas or motions for to compel to make them share the information because really the court's just coming up with custody and money, your assets and support. So it just slows the process down. Another thing that I thought was really, really interesting when I interviewed the attorney, whose name is Eric Posmant by the way. There's just a little shout out to him. He was amazing. He also said, I don't want any of your clients, Lisa. Don't ever send me high conflict cases because he didn't know that mine was going to be like that. But he said, people who are victims of domestic violence, which is all we deal with. And it's not for the reason I thought. He said, victims of domestic violence, especially emotional abuse, have this hope that things are not going to stay this bad. And that's what keeps people in these relationships. It usually takes an average of 7 to 9 times to get out of an abusive relationship because you have something called trauma bonding. Your brain chemistry has changed. There's something called intermittent reinforcement where it's like the highs and the lows. And just when, they do something bad, then they do something super nice. So your brain is like really, really confused. So when you have someone who has been dealing with that type of insidious psychological or emotional abuse and doesn't even know that it's abuse, they will often make excuses and say, well, I don't want to move forward with the process because my ex and I are going to go to counsel. We're going to try it again. Or I just want to see, or my ex is telling me these things. And so I trust that we're both going to do what's best for the kids. So lawyers are just like, we have to move this along. And so it stops and starts and stops and starts. And the justice system is so slow anyway and overburdened. We were just talking to a new client in Australia, and she said, here, there's a waiting list of 4 years to go to trial. I'm like, and we've heard that before with different countries too.
I couldn't imagine not being, because I was like, really, I feel like you can't move on because no matter how far and how much progress you make, this will always bring you back into that situation. And it just based on the story that you've told me about your experience and some of your clients, it kind of feels like the loudest voice wins when you're in the legal system. It's not really who's right, who's wrong, who's the loudest, who's going to be the most aggressive. And that's so unfortunate
Yeah, but
because
that's
you're,
not true. That's not true. It
yeah.
feels like that. I
Right,
think it's
yeah.
not, yeah, it's not the loudest. They can get away with that for so long, but it's the one we actually teach something called like the marathon mindset, not just that it's gonna take a long time, but how do you stay in the game? Because like I said, they're trying to wear you down. So they want you to quit. Their lawyer wants you to quit. They'll use all kinds of strategies to make you give up, especially if you're representing yourself. And so learning how to keep coming back and keep trying it again and to not lose faith. And even though it's so unfair, I mean, there's really like three emotions associated with legal abuse that I lived with that our clients all live with as well. The first is rage. Every day I would wake up like furious. It wasn't even at my ex. I didn't even care about my ex. I was like, I know what he is. It was at the system for allowing this to go on for so long and not enforcing orders. And that led to a deep sense of injustice of like, here we are in America and like, really? Like, this is how we operate? Like, this is so outrageous. And we have lots of attorneys as clients who I think feel that injustice even more deeply because they work in the justice system and they're like, I can't believe this is happening. And then the last feeling is one of despair. This is never gonna end. They're never gonna enforce orders. My ex is not doing what they're supposed to do. And I just feel like I can't go on. And there is high rates of suicide from people dealing with this, as well as parental alienation, which we haven't even gotten into yet. That's when turning the kid against the other parent.
So unfortunate because I also have a friend who right now is going through like a little custody battle. and we've had several conversations. And she said, family court doesn't feel like it was designed for the truth sometimes. It feels like it's designed to waste paper.
Mhm.
I didn't cue any of this up. It's just so funny that you telling me this just reinforced that rhetoric a bit, that it's crazy that this system that's supposed to be designed to help us and to keep things equal and fair is not as efficient as it could be. And it just becomes a bigger burden on everybody else.
Yeah, yeah, and they're so overburdened. I mean, COVID really contributed to this too, to domestic violence in general. So everybody's overburdened, nobody has time, it's super expensive. It's just exhausting. And but understanding the way the system works and trying to do what you can do outside of the system, and that's something we do a lot with our clients. We're like, let's get you off the court's calendar. Even if we can't finish it, like let's start moving it along and doing what we can, and a lot of that is through what we call strategic communication with your ex directly to see what we can come up with. And even if you can't fix things, but to build like a really powerful case.
That's important because, like I said, you want to get out of that stagnation game as soon as we can. But you started to talk about something that I think is another very important aspect that I want to make sure that we cover today. And that is when your ex starts to weaponize your kids against you, like that has to be so hard. I don't even want to ever imagine what that would feel like, because it's like being in a fight where you're being held down. Like you can't fight back because the weapon is your kids and you never want to hurt them. You try to be a good parent in person and not degrade or manipulate them against the other person. So it's like you're taking just a one-sided beating.
Yeah, it is one of the most heartbreaking things that can happen to a parent, and it affects 22 million divorced parents in America and Canada alone. Can you believe that?
That's a lot of people. Like that is a lot of families.
Yeah, and most people don't know what it is. They just know that they've experienced it, or they know someone that it's happening to, and they're just like, "Oh, I didn't know. I just thought it was, my ex was being difficult." But yeah, I mean, it's really, really awful. And we think about the difference too, where like God forbid you have a child who died. But if you had a child who died, you'd have a whole community rallying around you trying to support you. But when you have a child that stops talking to you and doesn't want contact, especially women and the whole mother thing in our society, there's all of this shame and judgment of like, what did you do that's so bad that your kids don't want anything to do with you? They don't understand the nature of domestic violence and control and power, and how, there's it's such a complex issue, but a lot of times kids see who has the power in relationship and they fawn. They do what they can to keep themselves safe. So, that's it's very, very hard. And like you said, you can't even defend yourself. Like when your kid comes to you, let's say, and they repeat what we call poisonous messages that your ex has said about you. Like it's like your ex is talking to you through your kid, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, my kid's turning into my ex, and I got away from this person, and now they're in my house and they're gonna be just like them, and this is devastating. They'll say, oh, mom or dad said this about you, which is really stinging. But if you say that's not true, it's really this, you're doing the same thing as your ex, in that you are telling your child what to believe. So it's the same behavior, and it doesn't work because they're like, "I trust both of you. You're my parents. I love both of you, and somebody's lying, and I don't know what to do with that."
Right. I mean, that kind of leads me into my next point of what can you or what should you do when you get this poisonous message, when you are painted out to be the villain, because you don't want to deflect, because they know that you're deflecting, that you're just not giving them an answer. But you also, like I said, don't want to do more of the same and start to demonize. So, what do you really do in those situations?
Yeah, it's really hard, and this is something you can do. It's not like a simple thing, but
Mhm.
one of the most important things for kids in general, and I know from teaching high school, this was something I wanted to impart, but kids in these situations need to develop critical thinking skills. And so that involves a lot of listening to them and encouraging them to explain why they believe what they believe. But a kid that comes repeating a poisonous message about you, there could be reasons for it. One could be that their other parent is saying, say this to you and let me know what happens. And when that message comes across and then you react, like you get angry or you yell, and then the kid comes back and reports it to that alienating parent, that kid gets rewarded for it. So you can't do that. So one of the most important things you can do is first, you have to self regulate. Like you have to get a lot of help in the background to be ready for it because it's going to happen. And the next thing that you can do, and that's, therapy and support groups and stuff like that. That's a whole other thing. But one of the things you can do in the moment is to just try to control your face and realize that the truth doesn't matter at that moment, but what matters is your kids' feelings and validating their feelings and not saying that's not true or that's how it is. It doesn't matter. The most important thing you have to do is deal with that kid's feelings. That kid is angry, sad, frustrated, whatever. So you kind of have to sit there and say, wow, like, tell me more, and get them to keep talking. Like, where are you getting this from? Like, you think, me. Do you really think that? Can you give me some examples of why you would say something like that? It depends on the age of the child, but I'm thinking teenagers in particular. But you have to let them get it out and you have to take it and then you deal with the facts later. But you want to show that you are there for them, that you're there to listen to them because that other side is not. So just starting to show a contrast in your communication and how you are around your child is going to make a difference. Consistently being like that, like shutting your mouth and letting them talk, or just being quiet, or just being, not letting them continue to verbally abuse you, but to see, if you get anywhere and if they still keep going, you could say, I'm gonna step out for a little while. I really want to hear what you have to say, but I can't let you talk to me like that. But I really do care how you feel, and I want to know more. So it's a lot of work. There's, a lot more to it, but basically focus on their feelings, not on the truth.
I think that is a really powerful principle. And it's not just effective when dealing with children or divorce. I think that's just a really great mechanism or tool that you can use even when you're in a healthy relationship and you're having a bit of conflict, because that does happen in healthy relationships. You won't agree 100% of the time. You're different people, you have different perspectives. I never try to say I'm right when I'm arguing or having a discussion with my partner, with a coworker. I don't want to be like, I'm right, you're wrong. My coworker laughed at me, I think the other day, because she's like, you probably think I'm stupid. And I was like, no, I don't think you're stupid. I'm really curious. I think you have an interesting neural pathway. Like, I would have never thought about this way or like this. So I want to hear it out. Like, and she kind of was like, "Oh, well, you physically saw the relief, the diffusing of it." And I would say it didn't matter if I was right, she was wrong. It wasn't a creativity. It doesn't matter. I really want to know how you felt in that moment, and then why did you feel that way, or why did you think that, so that we can understand each other, and then that we can make better decisions going forward. So I think that is a great principle just to adopt in all aspects of your relationships.
Yes, I get the sense that you are very high on the social emotional skill level.
You don't get to do this for almost 5 years and not get just a hint of emotional intelligence.
Right, right. And approaching with curiosity, I mean, that's the key, is to be curious. So not to form judgment, just to say, I want to know. And by doing that, you're showing that you care. And that's very disarming. And what you said about healthy relationships. So my partner, Chris, who's the male half of Been There, Got Out, we've been together like 10 and a half years. And when we first got together, I remember we were having an argument about something and he was like, hold on a second, I'm going to get a pad of paper. I was like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, I'm listening to you. I don't want to interrupt. I want to make sure I remember what you're saying because I want to respond to the different and I talk really fast." So he said, I want to jot stuff down. I want to respond. And just that act alone made me feel so good because I felt like he was really listening and paying attention. So that was brilliant. And I told him, he's like, "Oh, we learned that in like business school."
I tell people this all the time. I love when you are in a situation when you have people from different backgrounds, because you never know the random skill that you thought was mundane or
Mhm.
useless, how it could be applied to another situation or like really impress somebody. And that was one of those things, like taking out the pad to be like, no, we need to circle back to these points. I was like, they're not just ideas, they're focal points of discussion. I want to remember what they are.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you just said about the people from different backgrounds, I think about the people that we work with who are we have a hashtag called from puddle to ninja. So they meet us, they're in a puddle state. They're like, oh my God, I can't do anything. But to note that they have a lot of skills. Number one, they have survival skills because they've functioned in an unhealthy relationship for so long. But many of our clients are like super brilliant and successful, and they've just lost their center. And so reminding them, like, you have these skills that you can use, whether it's in court or in negotiating with your ex, because you know them better than anyone. You know what triggers them, you know what placates them. But all of this is really, really important intel. So let's use that. And I think it is also important to remind people of their skills, especially when they feel like they have nothing to offer.
100%. People will be more receptive, be more open, will stay longer when they're in an environment where they feel seen, heard, and appreciated. I was like, words of affirmation without acts of service or the quality time to really build that relationship are just words. I had a conversation with somebody. I can't even remember if it was at work or if it was one of my clients the other day about the difference between being nice and being genuine. It's like you can say niceties all day, but if I don't know you and the actions aren't really backing it up, I'm not going to feel supported and I'm going to think it's just jargon. Whereas when you're genuine, your words match your actions and vice versa. I can now believe what you say. And I know when you say something that you'll do it. And I think that is a huge distinction that not ever a lot of people think or make when they talk about people.
Actually, when you say that, it made me think about how one red flag for me is when someone announces what a good person they are. Why are you telling me that you're a good person? Why do you need to tell me?
We say this all the time. Are you really a good person if you have to say it?
Right.
Like, if you have to wear a shirt that says, I'm a good person, now I'm going to ask you, are you telling me or asking me? Because I'm a little uncertain.
Yeah. Show me. You don't need to say anything. You're saying it is making me very suspicious.
Yeah, right. I was like, hold on, let me check my back to make sure there's not a knife or anything in it real quick.
Yeah.
But speaking of red flags, I think this brings me to today's mini game. Normally we do the quickie questions, but this isn't fun and lighthearted. This is serious and a little chaotic.
Mhm.
So today we're going to do a little mini game called Courtroom or Red Flag.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
You get three options. You can say, yes, I'd agree to this, no, or run. Okay.
Or what was the last one?
Run.
Run. Okay. Yes.
Get
No.
out of there.
Run.
You got to go. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, the first one. Your ex starts to file constant or frequent emergency motions. Are you running? Are you just gonna stay there? Or does that never happen?
You're going to stay there and you're going to deal with it.
There we you know what? And that's how you win, right? You're like, you're not gonna wear me down. No, I'm gonna stay, I'm gonna fight. I have my paper trail, I have my evidence.
You're
You're
gonna
I'm
you're
gonna
gonna run and get some training on how to deal with it, though.
and where are we gonna get that from? We're gonna get that from Lisa. Okay, yeah. Good point, good point, good point. I hear it, I hear it. Okay. Your ex starts to use your kid as a messenger. Is that something that you think would be a red flag? Or is that something that they think is like a tool for the court?
No, you are going to deal. That is a red flag. You're going to send a strategic communication, and you're going to start building a paper trail of your ex's patterns of behavior over time and the impact it has on your children, because your child is not ever to be used as a messenger.
You're right. I was like, we had them for a lot of reasons. That was not one of them.
Right.
Unless the message was, what do you want for dinner? Go take this in your room. No, your ex or the other parent starts to record all the calls. Is that, like, yeah, that's a fair thing to do. No way. Or like, I'm getting out of there. I'm not dealing with that.
Okay, you can't run, because if you run and you don't spend your court order time with your kid's going to feel it and you're going to look really bad. So recording calls is actually a feature now on a lot of parenting apps when there is high
Really?
conflict involved. Yes. However, people are sometimes not aware. Recording calls is normal or standard now. But if you are recording exchanges, if you're recording and your ex is recording exchanges, like where you're physically handing the child over, that can be perceived as whoever's doing it is a high conflict person. And we often have to tell our clients, don't do that, because it's creating an atmosphere where, like, something is wrong and your kid is feeling it. So we say to our people, don't do that unless it's like you need to or something is happening. And certainly there's things that are happening that need to be recorded. But in general, don't walk around recording people because it makes it like it's just instigating.
Right, yeah. Once you it's that performative piece that makes everybody feel uncomfortable,
Yeah.
and you're like, "Why?"
Right. Right.
You
Like,
know?
why is this necessary?
Mhm. Now, if they were obviously doing something to endanger the child, I was like, "Okay, yeah, like, they left the child on the trunk of the car, or they drove off with before the kid got into the car."
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna record that,
Right,
but
right. That's like
yeah,
once
just
in a
wait.
while, right, but not
Mhm.
like
Right,
every single time, and then the kid is like, "What's going on? Like, why?
exactly.
Why is my parent recording my other parent?" Like, they're
Yeah,
that's sending a message the other parent is unsafe, and
mhm.
so you're the one inadvertently sending a poisonous message.
Okay, can definitely see that. Once again, the manipulation game has to be strong for these people.
Yes.
I thought I was a creative, I was clever, but sometimes hearing these situations or seeing the transcripts, I was like, "I'm not that creative because never would I have thought to do this."
Mhm.
The plot, it has been lost. But once again, logical brain out the window. Okay, last one. I'm gonna take a run out of it because we're not running away from anything.
Okay, right.
Okay. We are staying, we are getting our time, we're being heard, we're making sure that everybody's safe. So I'm just gonna say, yeah, I would do this, or no way in hell this is happening. Okay. Your ex now decides, hey, we should just settle this without lawyers.
We should settle it. We should have a lawyer in the background. We don't need to tell our ex that we have a lawyer in the background because then it can actually keep the peace down, and that's what I did, and my lawyer said, "You play dumb, go to mediation, work it out yourselves, follow what the mediator says, and then make sure you didn't do something wrong, before you finally sign." But yes, lawyers are very helpful, but in mediation and really depends on the situation. Again, a lot of our clients are dealing with extreme domestic violence and they don't feel physically safe in the same room. But for more effective mediation, to have lawyers in there, they are advocates and they'll keep it going and fight for their clients' rights, and that's fine. But it costs a lot more money, and you can generally get more done when it's just a mediator who often is a lawyer, but is a neutral party and can work with the two of you and kind of cross the finish line. But you wanna have a lawyer you wanna have your own lawyer who is your advocate, but not necessarily there with you as you're trying to settle.
And that's I know I said that was the last thing. That was actually that's a big point that I feel like a lot of people who are new to this family court situation or court in general, whether you're taking on a former partner, a business partner, or a large corporation, is lawyers don't have to be present at every junction. And there are other resources that you can use to make your case or to settle, such as a mediator. So, I mean, like, a mediator isn't necessarily a lawyer. It's just somebody who can kind of help you come to equal terms or terms that everybody's happy about.
Well, I wouldn't say happy, but come to an agreement.
Okay.
Come to an agreement. Usually nobody's happy, and actually some mediators will say, "If neither of you is happy, it means I did my job right."
Yeah.
It's more
I
fair.
because you're right. Lawyer and happy in the same sentence rarely occurs. So I should have realized that when I said it.
It's okay,
But you're right. Yeah. When everybody feels like I'm not getting completely screwed, I was like, okay, you twisted one arm, not both. I can live with it.
right, and also with settlement, when you negotiate, none of the conversations or offers are ever admissible in court. So you can go back and forth, and this is where you can save so much money basically deciding what you might do, and nobody can force you to sign a settlement. So it's worth, like, going back and forth and almost, like, seeing what matters to the other person. Mediation is, like, a very interesting playing field, and people get scared, but we always tell our clients, "You don't have to sign anything," but just go. It's great practice for we say it's like could be like a dress rehearsal for court. Let's see how persuasive you are, and if you don't get anywhere, at least you tried, but if you get somewhere, like, for example, I got my parenting plan done in mediation. My lawyer was like, "Awesome, you just saved thousands and thousands of dollars." In courtroom time, from paying me and being on that calendar. So it was like, so even if you can do something in mediation, the more you can kind of get out of the way, the less expensive it's going to be, the less time you'll have to spend in court, and it makes a judge happy because they're always sending you out. Go to mediation, try to work it out, work it out, work it out. So it's like, Your Honor, we already did this, this, this. Now we just have this little bit to do. They like that because they don't have time.
No, time is a commodity that is worth unlimited amount of dollars, but we have such a finite amount of it. So I love that you kind of broke that down. So anybody who's listening, who's either thinking about getting into a situation like this or is currently in the midst of a situation like this, that they now hopefully have a new tool that they didn't know they had before that could save them a lot of time and a whole lot of money, let's say.
Yeah. And think about it too. Negotiation is something we do all the time, every day in our lives. So it's a different type of negotiation. You can learn how to do it. It doesn't mean it's always going to be successful, but it's good to practice your negotiation skills because a lot of our clients hate conflict, but you're dealing with a very conflicted and conflictual person. So it's an important step in the healing process as well to learn how to stand up to a bully.
It's always funny that no matter how old you get, there will still be a bully lying around. It may go from the sandbox to the playground to the boardroom and then the courtroom, but they just always seem to pop up.
Mhm.
Just you know what? That I people ask this question all the time. If you had a genie, like what would your three wishes be? I think that might be one of my wishes. Just can we get rid of bullies?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one.
I think I was like, I don't need three more wishes or unlimited funds. I was like, let's just get rid of bullies. That'd be a great wish. I'd be okay with using
I know. With my high school teaching, I'm thinking, well, let's just teach them like empathy skills.
empathy.
Mm,
It's crazy how many people know of it but choose to ignore it.
mm.
But no, I almost forgot to talk about a really big thing that you have coming up in 2026. You have a new course coming out, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Let's definitely get into that because people need your assistance. I know that there's need for it, there's a market for it, unfortunately. So let's hear more about this course and where we can find you at.
Okay, so first I'm just going to mention the course that we released that we do more than anything with everybody, and it's called On Strategic Communication, and it's called How to Communicate with Your Ex Without Destroying Your Case or Losing Your Mind. So that's out already. But the one that's coming out actually is going to be tied to our book that'll be out in March. We're actually going to be in London for the launch date with the guy who wrote the forward to the book, whose name is Bill Eddy. He's a former social worker, lawyer, and he founded something called the High Conflict Institute, which now works with, I mean, they train professionals in the legal community, but they also work with governments and businesses to try to reduce the level of conflict in general. So we're going to an amicable divorce network conference in London, and it just happens to be the day after the book's release. So we're really excited about that. So the course is also connected to the book, which is called When Your Ex Turns the Kids Against You. And it's a very intense, detailed, I think there's like 16 modules that I've been working on, and each is like well over an hour with all kinds of guest speakers, people that I've interviewed in the past few years who are experts in alienation, whether they're attorneys, alienation coaches, trauma therapists, mental health professionals, reunification counselors, co parenting coordinators, just everybody who deals with this issue because our brand Been There Got Out is about giving practical actionable advice. So it's going to be this, I'm almost thinking of it like a 12-step program, like you can jump in anytime, but it gets a lot into what you can do legally when your ex is turning the kids against you, but even more so what you can do outside of court. Because, like we talked about, this isn't just now when they're under 18, this is for the rest of their lives. And how do we build close relationships with our children? How do we teach them resilience and coping skills, especially when they have a difficult other parent? I mean, because these are the attachments that they're going to carry through for the rest of their lives. And so that's why it is so important to nip this in the bud. Even if a kid is about to age out of the system, there's still ways, I think, to negotiate and to persuade a judge as to why you need certain types of therapies because again, like it's going to have such ripple effects in society and for future generations if kids just think, "Okay, I can just cut people off without even a conversation."
I mean, we're kind of in that situation now. Like the civility, communication skills, empathy are skills that I feel like we're kind of prevalent in my childhood and definitely my parents taught me about, but are almost non existent today. People aren't used to hearing the word no and how to
Mm,
deal with doing things that they don't want to do.
right.
Commitment isn't really a thing anymore with swipe culture and, all these other kind of hot trigger, arky, trendy words that are getting thrown around.
Yeah. Entitlement.
Entitlement, yes. And then the lack of, and this is not something that's new, but the lack of emotional education. It's
Yes.
like if you look at a lot
Character.
of other
Character
countries,
education.
they really focus on not just academic education with the youth, but it's also well rounded personal development. And I feel like we just started manipulating the information we give kids and teaching them to create so many boundaries that you can't navigate them or have a conversation around them because any and everything you say now breaks a boundary. And so if you break a boundary, you're automatically like discounted. So I want to get back to a point where we could just still be respectful of each other, but also learn to understand the easiest parable, like to walk the mile in the other person's shoe.
Right, right. Like what happened to healthy debate? And that's actually another thing that is highly recommended, I think, for kids in general, but especially kids in these situations to develop critical thinking skills. My son was actually like a national debate champion, not because of our situation, but he was born, defiant and arguing. And so it was the perfect playing field for him. But with debate, it's like kids will get a topic and then they have a few minutes and they have to prepare and argue and then they have to argue the opposite. They have to take the other side. So it really flexes your brain to have to think that quickly and to be able to see the different sides of an argument. So it's so important for character education and to listen to other perspectives and be able to be respectful and curious.
We've had this conversation multiple times on the show that we don't have to agree. We don't have to have the same viewpoint or the same ideology. However, we do have to have the same basic human principles. And if we can't get on board with that, that's when I start to lean into maybe we're not designed for each other's lives.
Yeah, yeah.
So I
But
think that's the difference.
yes, but it sounds like after some conversations.
Exactly. Day has been an amazing conversation that hopefully shook a lot of people awake and gave them more than just food for thought, leftovers for thought is what I'm going to call it. Because there's enough to put away for a while, but it's still very useful information, whether you've gone through this and you're still feeling the after effects, whether you're at the start of this journey and you don't want it to turn into this hostile in court stalker situation. I mean, if just in general, if this episode hit a little too close to home, good. That means you're not done. That means you're just getting started. You're not running away. You want to stand your ground and not just do what's best for you, but do what's best for everybody involved in the situation. And you want to make sure that you're taking advantage of the system and not letting the system or your situation take advantage of you. So if you have more questions, if you want to enroll in these courses coming out in 2026 and get ready for the book to go with it, Lisa, where can we find you? How do they get started?
Super easy. Our website is beenthere.com, and it's just Chris and I. There's a little blue button on the homepage if someone is dealing with something like this. You can schedule a free discovery call, which is a Zoom meeting, so we can have a conversation and see how we can help. On social media, Been There, Got Out. Instagram's my home base. We have Been There, Got Out podcast, Been There, Got Out YouTube channel. The first book is called Been There, Got Out with the subtitle. The second one is also Been There, Got Out when your ex turns the kids against you. Just very, very easy. My email is lisa@beentheregotout.com. It's just Chris and I, we always answer.
Guys, you heard it here. Make sure you get your copy. If you're seeing this in early January, make sure you get your copy of Been There, Got Out. And then if you're seeing this in the spring or the summer or anytime after, make sure you get both copies of Been There, Got Out and Been There, Got Out when your ex starts to turn the kids against you. And be sure to send them an email or a DM or a message if it was helpful and let them know you came. You're part of the not so bad family. And who knows, maybe we'll get Lisa back on after her press tour and her tea party to give us some more information so we can help fight all of these hostile,
Bully.
unamicable divorce, bully situations in your relationship in the courtroom. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. You made it to the end of another episode of the Not So Bad Bachelor Pad. Remember, it doesn't cost you anything to just be kind. But if being kind doesn't work, be ready to fight. Not physically, but you get the context in which I'm talking about. Keep your receipts. Make sure you do get your time. Make sure your voice is heard. And I will see all you amazing bachelors, bachelorettes, 100 people and everything in between next week for an all new episode of the Not So Bad Bachelor Pad. See you guys.